Welcome back to the Deep Book Digest, where we take your picks for books and turn them into knowledge nuggets you can actually use.
Oh, I love that.
So this time we're diving into Prince Harry's memoir, Spare a Book, that's got everyone talking.
I think this deep dive is going to be so fascinating because we're going beyond the headlines. We're getting Harry's raw and an unfiltered perspective on royal life, the good, the bad, and the just plain bizarre.
Yeah, and right off the bat, Harry paints this surprisingly vivid picture of his grandfather, Prince Philip. You wouldn't expect it. But he draws a parallel between Philip and Diana, saying they both had this incredible zest for life.
It's fascinating, right? This insight into Philip's personality, which often gets overshadowed by his more stoic public image.
Totally.
Harry even suggests that Philip was a strong advocate for Diana even before she became a princess.
Oh, wow.
Which adds a whole new layer to their relationship.
It really does, and it makes you wonder, what role did Philip play in shaping the course of events? Did he influence Charles's decision to marry Diana? It's like a historical puzzle with missing pieces.
Yeah.
Speaking of complex relationships, though, Harry doesn't shy away from the tension with his brother William, especially after Philip's funeral.
That confrontation at the funeral is a real turning point in their relationship.
Yeah.
Harry describes this feeling of being ganged up on using really powerful language, like in league, to convey his sense of isolation and vulnerability.
Wow. You can practically feel the tension radiating off the page.
I know.
He talks about feeling like he was walking into a duel, facing off against his own brother and the weight of royal expectations. And this feeling of being misunderstood by William, particularly about his decision to leave the UK, becomes a recurring theme throughout the book.
It's almost as if they're speaking different languages, each interpreting the same events through vastly different lenses.
Right.
And this leads us to one of the most insightful aspects of the book, Harry's reflections on memory and truth. He argues that objective facts are not the same as personal truth.
Okay, so it's like he's saying that lived experience has its own kind of validity.
Exactly.
A perspective that makes you question the official narratives we often accept without question.
Yeah, and he connects this idea to the Windsor family history, suggesting that their version of events has always been shaped by perception and interpretation.
It makes you think about how history is written, right?
It does.
But it's fascinating because even with all this talk of personal truth, Harry still seems deeply connected to the rituals and traditions of his upbringing.
Yeah.
He describes the grand staircase in his childhood home, mentioning how Queen Elizabeth always preferred the lift. And he even recalls bowing to a statue of Queen Victoria as a child.
It's interesting.
You'd think a prince would be exempt from bowing to anyone, even a statue.
Right.
But these details give us a glimpse into the strange contradictions of royal life. You know, how tradition and modernity coexist in unexpected ways.
And speaking of Queen Victoria, Harry dives into her personal life, highlighting the tragedies she endured, her father's sadistic tendencies, her husband Albert's early death.
Oh, wow.
It's almost as if he's drawing parallels between these historical figures and his own experiences, finding echoes of love loss and duty within the royal lineage.
It's this blend of personal reflection and historical context that makes the book so compelling.
I agree.
You're not just getting a gossip rag, you're getting a deeper understanding of the forces that shaped Harry's life, the events that led him to where he is today. And then, of course, there's the moment that changed everything, Diana's accident.
Oh, yeah.
Harry describes the heartbreaking experience of learning about the accident, the carefully chosen words, the lack of detail. He was told his mother had a head injury, but nothing about the paparazzi chase that preceded it.
You can imagine the confusion, the disbelief, the sense of unreality.
Yeah.
Harry even admits to believing for a time that Diana had staged the accident as a diversion.
Wow. So it's like his mind couldn't process the truth, so it created a more palatable narrative, a way to cope with the unbearable pain.
And then comes the public spectacle of grief, Harry and William walking behind their mother's coffin, the eyes of the world, watching their every move.
Yeah, that's such a haunting image.
It is.
It speaks to the unique burdens of royalty, how even in moments of profound personal loss, duty, and public image take precedence.
He mentions that his uncle Charles Spencer was furious about them walking in the procession.
Oh, wow.
Calling it barbaric.
Really?
It's a powerful reminder that behind the pomp and ceremony, there are real people grappling with unimaginable pain.
Absolutely.
There's also this intriguing detail about the royal standard being draped on Diana's coffin. A break from protocol that reflects the extraordinary circumstances surrounding her death.
So it speaks to the tension between tradition and personal sentiment. a tension that will become increasingly prominent as Harry's story unfolds.
You're all right.
And from there, we shift to a seemingly mundane but revealing chapter in Harry's life.
Right.
Boarding school. He talks about these matronly bathing assistants and mandatory lice checks experiences that seem jarringly at odds with the image of royal privilege.
You'd think being a prince means you're exempt from those awkward adolescent rituals.
Right.
But Harry's description throws some cold water on that fantasy.
It does.
It shows that even with all the privilege in the world, some experiences are universal and maybe not so pleasant.
Exactly. And it highlights the British tradition of sending upper-class children to boarding schools.
Right.
A practice that's often credited with fostering independence, but can also have a profound impact on emotional development.
Yeah.
Imagine being ripped away from your family at such a young age, thrust into this rigid, hierarchical environment.
It's bound to leave a mark.
He also talks about these grub days, which sound like every kid's dream.
Yeah.
Feasts of sweets and junk food.
Yeah.
And he even throws in his opinion on the renaming of opal fruits to Starburst, calling it heresy.
It's these little details that add color and personality to the narrative, reminding us that behind the royal title, there's a real person with his own quirks and preferences.
We then get a glimpse into Harry's relationship with his father, King Charles. He describes Charles's nightly ritual of tucking him in and tickling his face, a tender moment that reveals a softer side to the often reserved monarch.
It's a reminder that even within the constraints of royalty, there's room for love and affection.
Totally.
And it highlights the challenges Charles faced as a single parent, navigating the complexities of his role while trying to provide emotional support for his sons.
We also get this amusing anecdote about Charles giving a passionate speech defending Shakespeare, which is ironic considering Harry's own struggles with books.
Right.
He admits to preferring Of Mice and Men, a choice that speaks to his empathy for the underdog and his interest in stories of social injustice.
It's a subtle detail, but it hints at Harry's developing social conscience, his awareness of the world beyond the confines of the palace.
And this leads us to a pivotal experience in Harry's life, his first trip to Africa. He talks about his anticipation for a safari led by Markle,
Oh, yeah.
a Welsh guard he clearly admires.
Markle seems to represent a kind of idealized masculinity for Harry. Strong, resilient, deeply connected to nature.
Right.
It's a contrast to the more formal, emotionally restrained figures he's surrounded by at home.
And on the safari, wouldn't you know it, Harry gets attacked by a leopard?
I know, crazy.
But instead of freaking out, he sees it as a sign from his mother.
It's a remarkable interpretation.
It is.
That speaks to his need to find meaning in even the most frightening experiences.
Yeah.
It also suggests that Diana's presence continues to loom large in his life, even years after her death.
It's in Africa that Harry seems to truly come alive. He describes his awe at the abundance of life in the Okavango Delta, contrasting it with the sterility of his previous experiences.
Yeah.
Imagine this. You spent your whole life in palaces and boarding schools, surrounded by formality and tradition.
Right.
Then you're suddenly immersed in this vibrant, untamed wilderness.
It's a sensory overload.
It is.
A stark contrast to the controlled environments he's accustomed to.
And get this, he even gets tricked into smoking basil by a tour guide thinking it's a joint. You have to wonder what was going through his mind at that moment.
It's a hilarious anecdote that underscores his naivety and his willingness to embrace new experiences, even if they lead to unexpected consequences.
But this is just the beginning of Harry's journey.
Right.
His African adventures will continue to shape his worldview and his sense of self.
Right.
We'll delve deeper into those experiences in part 2 of our deep dive.
I can't wait.
Me too.
So stay tuned. It's more than just a travelogue, It's a journey of self-discovery, where he confronts his past, grapples with his identity, and ultimately starts to envision a different future for himself.
And he does it all while dodging leopards and accidentally smoking basil.
Right, exactly. It's during this period of intense training and self-discovery that he meets Meghan Markle.
And it sounds like it was love at first sight.
Oh, yeah.
He talks about their instant connection, their shared love for Africa, their deep conversations that span everything from politics to philosophy. He even uses this charming analogy of a conveyor belt to describe how Meghan stopped the endless stream of faces he'd encountered throughout his life.
It's a very romantic notion.
Yeah?
The idea that she disrupted his entire worldview.
Right.
Offering him a glimpse of a different kind of life, one filled with authenticity and connection.
But of course, falling in love with an American actress is bound to complicate things, especially when you're a prince.
Oh, absolutely.
And boy, does it get complicated.
It does.
He talks about the challenges of keeping their relationship secret, the clandestine meetings at Soho House, the fear of exposure that loomed over every stolen moment together.
Their courtship plays out against this backdrop of intense scrutiny.
Yeah.
A constant reminder that their love is not just a personal matter, but a public spectacle.
And this tension between private desires and public expectations will only escalate as their relationship deepens.
He describes their magical trip to Botswana.
Right.
Sort of second first date where they truly fell for each other under the vast African sky.
It sounds idyllic, a world away from the pressures of royal life.
It does, but even in this paradise, they can't escape the long shadow of the British tabloids.
Right, and when they return to London, the fairy tale begins to unravel.
The press catches wind of their relationship, and the headlines explode with a mix of fascination and thinly veiled prejudice.
Yeah, okay, remember all those fairy tales we grew up with? Well, this is where the real-life royal story takes a dark turn.
Yeah.
As Harry describes it. Meghan's arrival doesn't bring happily ever after.
No.
Instead, it rips the curtain back on some ugly truths about the royal family, prejudices, toxic dynamics, you name it.
The media frenzy surrounding Meghan is relentless.
It is.
Fueled by a mix of sexism, racism, and a deep-seated suspicion of anyone who dares to challenge the established order.
And Harry talks about the constant death threats.
Yeah.
The increased security measures the palpable fear that permeated their lives.
And what's perhaps most shocking is the lack of support from the institution that's supposed to protect them.
He describes a culture of silence, a reluctance to confront the blatant bigotry directed at Meghan, a prioritization of image over well-being.
It's as if the palace is more concerned with preserving its own power than safeguarding the happiness of its members.
Right, and this betrayal, this sense of abandonment, takes a heavy toll on both Harry and Meghan.
He talks about his own struggles with anger.
Right.
The unresolved trauma from his childhood resurfacing with a vengeance.
And he makes a decision that will forever change the course of his life. He seeks therapy.
That's huge.
It is.
This is a crucial turning point for Harry.
Right.
He's finally acknowledging the depth of his pain, the need to confront his demons and break free from the cycle of dysfunction that's plagued his family for generations.
So he proposes to Meghan, and they begin planning their wedding. But the media circus surrounding Meghan's father throws a wrench into their plans.
It's like the tabloids are determined to sabotage their happiness.
Right.
To exploit any vulnerability for a juicy headline.
The relentless pursuit of Meghan's father is a prime example of the media's exploitative tactics. Their willingness to prey on vulnerable individuals for sensational stories.
It is.
It's a stark reminder of the toxic power dynamics that often shape public narratives.
Right. And despite the chaos and the negativity, Harry and Meghan managed to pull off a beautiful wedding ceremony.
Yeah.
A moment of joy and hope amidst the storm.
It is. But the tensions with the palace and the media continue to escalate.
He describes awkward encounters with William and Kate, a growing sense of isolation within the royal family, and a toxic work environment where gossip and backstabbing are the norm.
So it's like a real-life soap opera, but with higher stakes and a lot less glamour.
He even recounts this bizarre anecdote about swimming with seals alongside Charles and Camilla.
Oh, wow.
A moment of apparent camaraderie that's undercut by the chef's warning about killer whales lurking nearby.
It's a perfect metaphor for their situation.
It is.
Even in moments of seeming tranquility, danger lurks beneath the surface.
And then comes the news of Meghan's pregnancy. An event that should be a cause for celebration, but instead triggers a wave of anxiety within the palace.
They're worried about everything from the baby's skin color to the potential media scrutiny.
Right.
And this fear, this lack of trust, creates a chasm between Harry and his family.
He describes the challenges of finding a suitable home.
Yeah.
The bureaucratic roadblocks that seem designed to thwart their every move. And the growing realization that they're not just unwelcome,
right,
but actively undermine within the institution.
And then things take a devastating turn. Harry shares the heartbreaking story of Meghan's suicidal thoughts.
Oh, gosh.
Her desperate cry for help, his own helplessness in the face of her suffering.
It's a gut-wrenching moment that lays bare the human cost of the relentless pressure and scrutiny they've endured.
It's a stark reminder that behind the titles and the tiaras, these are real people grappling with real emotions.
Yeah.
And the consequences of ignoring their pain can be catastrophic.
Right. They attend the Well Child Awards, an event that highlights the resilience of children facing serious illnesses. But Meghan's silent tears betray her inner turmoil.
It's a heartbreaking image that captures the depth of her despair, the weight of the world pressing down on her.
Yeah, and when a private letter from Meghan to her father is published, violating her privacy and twisting her words,
Right.
Harry's anger reaches a boiling point.
So he describes a confrontational meeting with William. The realization that the palace has been using negative press against them to protect other members of the family.
Oh, wow.
And the decision to sue the tabloids, a bold move that marks a turning point in their relationship with the institution.
They're no longer willing to be pawns in the royal game.
Right.
To sacrifice their well-being for the sake of image and tradition.
They're fighting back, reclaiming their narrative, and setting boundaries that have never been crossed before.
Exactly. And this leads to the bombshell announcement that will send shockwaves through the monarchy. They're stepping back from royal life.
So they've made their escape right. But freedom comes at a price.
It does.
Harry paints a stark picture of this new reality. Cut off financially, ties with his family severed, and facing a whole new world without the royal safety net.
Right. It makes you think about the trade-offs involved in choosing your own path.
He describes the tense negotiations with the Queen, the Sandringham Summit, where the future of the royal family hangs in the balance, and the emotional toll of leaving behind everything he's ever known.
It's a painful but necessary break.
It is.
A recognition that their well-being depends on creating a distance from the toxicity and dysfunction that permeates the institution.
And in their final act of defiance, they participate in a tell-all interview with Oprah Winfrey.
Oh, yeah.
A decision that sparks controversy, but also allows them to share their side of the story unfiltered and unapologetic.
That interview becomes a lightning rod for debate.
It does.
But it also provides a platform for Harry and Meghan to challenge the narratives that have been constructed around them, to expose the hypocrisy and the double standards that have shaped their experience.
Harry reflects on the monarchy, expressing his unwavering support for Queen Elizabeth, while acknowledging the need for change. He defends their decision to speak out, emphasizing their commitment to transparency and accountability.
It's a complex and nuanced perspective.
It is.
One that balances respect for tradition with a desire for progress, a recognition that the institution must adapt to survive in a changing world.
Spare is a deeply personal and often raw account of a life lived under extraordinary circumstances.
It is.
It's a story of family duty, love loss, and the struggle for personal truth.
What's particularly compelling is how Harry challenges the traditional narratives surrounding the monarchy,
Right.
offering a nuanced and often critical perspective on the institution and its relationship with the press.
Yeah, he's not afraid to expose the flaws and hypocrisies that exist behind the facade of royal privilege.
Definitely a book that will stay with you long after you finish reading it.
It will.
It leaves you pondering the complexities of family dynamics, the power of media manipulation, and the importance of finding your own voice in a world that often tries to silence it.
And here's a final thought-provoking question based on the source material.
Okay.
If Harry represents a break from tradition, a rejection of the constraints of the past, what does this mean for the future of the monarchy?
Right.
Can an institution built on hierarchy and tradition adapt to a world that increasingly values individuality and authenticity?
It's a good question.
That's something to chew on for sure.
It is.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive of Spare.
Absolutely.
We encourage you to submit your own books for future episodes.
Yeah.
Until then, happy reading.